Today's story begins with Margaret Holloway, a 52-year-old widow whose life has crumbled since cancer claimed her husband Robert 2 years ago. Margaret wakes at 3 a.m. Sleep hasn't come easily since Robert died. Tonight, like many nights, she slips out of bed, navigating the familiar path to the kitchen without turning on lights. In the kitchen, Margaret pulls Robert's reading glasses from the junk drawer and settles at the table, forcing herself to look at the foreclosure notice once more. 60 days to vacate. She reaches for Robert's photo, thumb tracing the outline of his smile. "I promised you I'd take care of them, Bobby." Margaret's reflection in the darkened window looks like a stranger, hair graying prematurely, face hollowed by grief and worry. Widowhood had crystallized around her like amber, preserving her grief while making it impossible to move. The morning alarm intrudes at 6 a.m. Margaret dresses methodically in her sole remaining professional outfit. Daniel, 16, shuffles into the kitchen in basketball shorts and a t-shirt with a hole near the collar. His shoes, Margaret notices with a pang, are splitting at the seams. "Another interview, Mom?" Daniel asks. "Marketing coordinator position at Highland Industries," Margaret answers. "It's perfect, similar to my old job before." Daniel nods. "You'll get it." "Of course I will," she lies. "There's lunch money on the counter." "Amanda called last night," Daniel says. "Something about her tuition bill. I'll call her from the car." The drive to Highland Industries takes her past familiar landmarks: the community college where she once taught business classes, the elementary school where Daniel learned to read, the hospital where Robert spent his final weeks. Each building a chapter in a book whose ending was being written in red ink. She calls Amanda from the car, putting on her "everything's fine" voice. "Mom, I got an email saying my account is past due." Amanda sounds breathless, worried. "If I don't pay by next Friday, I can't register for next semester." "Just a mix-up with the payment plan," Margaret soothes. "I'll handle it today." "Are you sure? Because I could pick up extra shifts at the coffee shop." "Absolutely not. Your job is to study, sweetheart. That's what Dad wanted." "But Mom, I promise, Amanda. Everything will be fine." The interview goes exactly as the previous 3 have gone. The hiring manager, younger than Margaret by at least a decade, smiles kindly throughout. "Too kindly. You have impressive experience, Mrs. Holloway, but I worry you might be overqualified for this position." Overqualified, the corporate euphemism for too old, too desperate, too much baggage. Margaret maintains her professional smile. "I assure you, I'm looking for stability, not advancement. I'd be committed to this role long term." "We'll be in touch by the end of next week," the manager says, already standing. The handshake is brief, perfunctory. Margaret walks to her car, climbs inside, and sits perfectly still for exactly 1 minute. No tears, no screams, just 60 seconds of allowing the defeat to wash over her before she rebuilds her armor. Her phone chirps with a text from Daniel. "How'd it go?" "Great," she replies. She takes the long way home, postponing the moment when she'll have to tell her children that their mother, once an accomplished marketing director who planned campaigns for national brands, cannot find employment sufficient to keep their home. The highway stretches ahead, gray and empty. Winter had come early this year, matching Margaret's mood. As she passes the junction to Highway 47, a neon sign catches her eye. "Storage auction today. Treasures await. 11 a.m. sharp." Margaret nearly dismisses it, but something in her chest tightens. A memory surfaces: Robert, sitting in his hospital bed during one of his more lucid days, holding her hand. "Sometimes you have to risk everything to save everything, Maggie," he'd said. Before she can reconsider, Margaret takes the exit. The storage facility appears ahead, secure lock storage, a sprawling complex of identical metal units behind a chain-link fence. The parking lot is already half full, pickups and vans lined up like vultures awaiting a feast. Margaret parks between a new Ford F-150 and a commercial van emblazoned with Mike's X's, antiques and resale. She checks her appearance in the rearview mirror, pinching color into her cheeks before grabbing her purse with the precious envelope inside. The facility office is cramped but warm. A balding man in his 60s looks up from a computer. His name tag reads, "Frank, Manager." "Here for the auction?" he asks. Margaret nods. "Yes, I've never done this before." "How does it work?" $25 registration fee gets you a bidder's paddle. You view units from the doorway only, no going inside, no touching, until you've paid. All sales final units must be emptied within 48 hours. He slides a clipboard toward her. Some folks have been doing this for decades. Don't let them intimidate you. What kinds of things do people usually find? Frank shrugs. Furniture, collectibles, tools. Sometimes trash, sometimes treasure. That's the gamble. Margaret completes the registration form, accepting bidder paddle #23. The remaining $322 feels impossibly light in her envelope. Outside, about 30 people have gathered. Margaret studies them surreptitiously, mostly men, mostly middle-aged, with the weathered look of professional scavengers. They talk in easy camaraderie, sharing cigarettes and stories. A few notice Margaret and nod politely, but most ignore the newcomer. A heavy-set man in a leather jacket sidles up beside her. "First time?" he asks. Margaret nods, clutching her paddle tighter. "Terry Blackwell." He offers his hand. "Been doing this for 15 years now. Got a shop in Millersville." "Margaret Holloway," she replies. "Just curious." Everyone starts curious. Then it gets in your blood. He gestures to the crowd. "See the big guy in the John Deere cap? That's Mike Denton. Anything with tools he'll fight for." Lady with the tablet, Sandra Price. She specializes in designer clothing, knows her brands. The rest are either dealers or flippers. "What about you?" Margaret asks. "I'm what they call a generalist. A little bit of everything." Terry lowers his voice. "Word of advice? Set yourself a limit and stick to it. Easy to get caught up in auction fever." A whistle pierces the air. Frank stands at the front of the crowd with a megaphone. "All right, folks, we've got 12 units today. Same rules as always. View from the doorway, no flashlights inside. Minimum bids start at 25. Let's begin." The crowd moves as one toward the first row of units. Margaret follows, staying close to Terry, grateful for his impromptu mentorship. The first unit contains furniture, a leather sectional, oak dining set, bedroom suite. The bidding quickly climbs to $800, then $1,200. A man in a moving company shirt claims it for $1,450. "Commercial mover," Terry whispers. "He'll flip that furniture for triple his cost." The second unit holds exercise equipment, barely used. It goes for $350 to a young couple. Margaret watches. These people know exactly what they're looking at, exactly what it's worth. She feels hopelessly outmatched. Units 3 through 6 follow similar patterns, professional bidders quickly assessing value, bidding with confidence. Margaret doesn't raise her paddle once, paralyzed by the recognition that this world operates by rules she doesn't understand. Unit 7 contains boxes of children's toys and clothes. It sells for $175. "Reseller," Terry explains. "She'll clean everything up, separate it into lots, and sell it online." By Unit 10, Margaret's feet ache. She's considering leaving when Frank announces the next lot. Unit 47, folks. The previous owner stopped payment 6 months ago. The metal door rolls up with a screech, revealing dozens of black contractor bags stacked floor to ceiling. Some have split open, revealing glimpses of fabric. The crowd's energy noticeably dims. Someone chuckles. "The garbage bag is special," a woman mutters. Terry grimaces. "Looks like an eviction cleanout. Someone's life is swept into trash bags." Margaret steps closer, peering into the dimness. The bags aren't the flimsy kitchen variety. They're heavy-duty contractor bags, the kind Robert used when they moved into their home. Thick, black, designed to protect valuables, probably clothes and household junk, someone says. But Margaret notices something others don't. The careful way some bags are tied, the methodical stacking. This wasn't a hasty eviction. Someone cared enough to protect what was inside. Starting bid at $25. Frank announces silence. No paddles rise. 25 going at once, Frank calls. Glancing around, Margaret's heartbeat clattered like loose change in a dryer. Robert's voice echoes in her head. Sometimes you have to risk everything. $50. The words escape before she can reconsider, her paddle suddenly in the air. Heads turn. Terry looks at her with surprise. $50 for Unit 47, Frank confirms. Do I hear 75? Silence again. The crowd has already mentally moved on to the next unit. 75, Margaret calls. Frank blinks. 75 from bidder 23. Do I hear 100? Nothing. Going once. 100. Margaret's voice cracks. Terry touches her elbow. Are you sure about this? You can't see what's in those bags. I'm sure. $100 going once. Going twice. $150. The words burst from Margaret like a prayer. Frank looks genuinely confused now. Nobody fights over trash bag units. 150 going once. Going twice. 200. Margaret calls. A murmur ripples through the crowd. This doesn't happen. Not for bags of unknown content. 200 going once. Going twice. 250. Margaret feels lightheaded now. Frank hesitates. Ma'am, are you certain? You can't see inside those bags. Margaret thinks of Robert's last words to her. Take care of our babies. She nods firmly. 250 going once. Going twice. Sold to bidder 23. The hammer falls at $250, leaving her with $72 to feed her family for the next week. The crowd disperses toward the final unit, but Margaret remains rooted, staring at her purchase. Terry lingers beside her. I hope you find something good, he says. Frank approaches with paperwork. You'll need to pay now, and you have 48 hours to clear everything out. As Margaret signs and counts out her money, Frank studies her. First auction? Is it that obvious? He nods. Most first-timers go for furniture or electronics, things they can see. Nobody goes for mystery bags. I have a good feeling. Margaret lies. Well, I hope there's something good in there for you. Margaret waits until the auction concludes before approaching her unit again. The crowd disperses quickly, professional buyers already loading their purchases into vehicles. She stands before the rolled-down door of Unit 47, key in hand, alone with her decision. Please, she whispers to whoever might be listening, please let there be something worth saving in here. It's nearly 2 p.m. when Margaret returns to Unit 47 with supplies, box cutter, work gloves, flashlight, and a tarp from Robert's workshop. She brought Daniel's old baseball bat too, partly for protection. Storage units sometimes harbor unwelcome wildlife, but mostly because its familiar weight grounds her. The metal door rolls up with a screech, revealing her $250 gamble in harsh fluorescent light. The unit is packed floor to ceiling with black bags, some torn, others meticulously tied. Dust motes dance in the air, carrying a staleness that speaks of years rather than months. Margaret spreads the tarp just outside the unit's entrance and pulls on her gloves. Her hands betrayed her, performing their own nervous dance as she selects the nearest bag and drags it onto the tarp. The plastic is thick, industrial grade. Margaret slices carefully along one side, holding her breath as she peels back the opening. Inside, neatly folded women's clothing emerges. Not just any clothing, a Chico's blazer with tags still attached. Original price, $189. Thrift store tag, $12.99. Never worn. Okay, Margaret whispers, removing the blazer to reveal more clothing beneath. A silk blouse from Ann Taylor. Dress pants from Talbot's. Each item is carefully folded despite being stuffed in a garbage bag, many still bearing original tags or thrift store prices. She pulls another bag forward, this one heavier. Inside, more women's clothing, higher-end pieces. A leather jacket from Wilson's Leather, a cashmere sweater set from Lord & Taylor, a cocktail dress with a Nordstrom label, original price, $350, thrift tag, $24.99. Margaret sits back on her heels, puzzled but increasingly hopeful. The clothing is all women's, all approximately size 10 to 12, ranging from professional wear to evening attire. The style suggests an older woman with sophisticated taste and substantial means, or at least someone who knew how to find quality at thrift prices. The third bag yields a significant upgrade, 6 handbags nestled among more clothing. Margaret recognizes the distinctive pattern of a Coach bag immediately. Her sister had saved for months to buy one years ago. This particular purse, a buttery leather hobo style, looks barely used. Margaret's hands tremble as she pulls out her phone and searches how to tell real Coach purse from fake. She checks the back, stitching, even, the hardware, heavy, with proper logo, and finally locates a serial number inside a small interior pocket. Another quick search confirms, authentic Coach, retail value approximately $380. Oh my God, Margaret whispers. She examines the other bags with newfound reverence. Another Coach. a Dooney and Bourke, 3 additional leather purses with designer labels she doesn't recognize, but suspects are valuable. Margaret moves faster now, adrenaline overriding caution. The next bag contains shoes, dozens of pairs, many still in boxes. Nine West, Naturalizer, Clark's. Not the highest-end brands, but quality merchandise, many unworn. By the 5th bag, a pattern emerges. These aren't random belongings hastily packed during an eviction. This is a carefully curated collection, systematically stored by someone who valued quality and took pains to preserve it. The 6th bag delivers the first true surprise: jewelry boxes. Not fine jewelry in velvet cases, but fashion pieces in distinctive packaging. Brighton collections with their recognizable heart motifs. Pandora charms nestled in individual pouches. Sterling silver necklaces with Tiffany blue boxes that make Margaret's heart skip before she realizes they're not actually Tiffany, but a similar brand. She opens a small velvet pouch to find Pandora charms scattered loose, at least 20 metal pieces with distinctive designs. Margaret knows these are expensive. Her cousin collects them on a bracelet, each charm costing $50.90. A sterling silver heart, a graduation cap, a mother-child design, a tiny airplane, each telling part of a life story. Margaret sits amid the growing pile of discoveries, calculating rapidly. Conservative estimates put the Coach bags alone at nearly $1,000 in resale value. The clothing, properly sorted and listed online, could easily bring several thousand more. And the jewelry, especially the Pandora pieces, represents significant value if authentic. Her phone shows 4 p.m. Daniel will be wondering where she is. With reluctance, Margaret begins repacking the items she's examined, organizing them more carefully than she found them. She'll need to return tomorrow with boxes, proper storage containers, and a better inventory system. As she's securing the unit, a slip of paper falls from one of the repacked bags, a receipt. It's from a store called Eleanor's Attic Boutique, dated 3 years earlier. The purchaser paid by credit card, Eleanor Blackwood. Margaret tucks the receipt into her purse. A name, the first clue to whom these belongings once belonged. At home, Daniel is heating leftover spaghetti when Margaret enters, arms laden with 2 Coach purses and a selection of clothing she couldn't bear to leave in the storage unit overnight. "Mom?" Daniel's expression shifts from concern to confusion. "Where have you been? And what's all that?" Margaret sets her treasures on the kitchen counter, suddenly aware how bizarre this must appear. "I bought a storage unit," she says. "You what?" Daniel abandons the microwave. "Why? It was an auction. I took a chance." "Is this real?" "I think so," along with about 20 more bags of things. Margaret gestures to her bounty. Designer clothes, jewelry, handbags. "Daniel, I think this might be valuable. Really valuable." "How much did you pay?" $250. "Mom?" Daniel's voice cracks with alarm. I know," Margaret says quickly. "But look at this purse. It's worth at least $300 retail. And there is more, plus jewelry, clothes with tags still on them." Daniel sits heavily at the kitchen table. At 16, he shouldn't have to worry about family finances, but Robert's illness had forced him to grow up quickly. "So what now? You're going to sell all this stuff?" "That's the idea." Margaret joins him. "Dan, I think this might be the break we've been waiting for. But what if it isn't? Then we'll figure something out. We always do." She squeezes his hand. "I need to call Amanda." In her bedroom, Margaret sits on the edge of the bed and calls her daughter. When Amanda answers, the background noise suggests she's at her campus coffee shop job. "Mom, is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, honey. I need you to research something for me. Do you have a minute?" "Sure. My break starts in 5. I need you to look up how to authenticate Coach handbags and Brighton jewelry, and maybe Pandora charms too." Why?" "I bought a storage unit today. It's full of what appears to be valuable items, but I need to verify they're authentic." "Mom, where did you get money to buy a storage unit?" "Amanda, please just help me with this research. I'll explain everything later." "Is this about my tuition? Because I told you I can take a semester off." "No, sweetheart. This might actually be good news. I just need to know what I'm dealing with." Amanda promises to call back with information, her tone mixing concern with curiosity. That evening, Margaret spreads her findings across the living room floor. Daniel helps his initial skepticism giving way to interest as they examine each item more carefully. "This stuff belonged to someone named Eleanor Blackwood," Margaret explains. "I think she must have been wealthy, or at least comfortable. The quality of everything is exceptional. So why would it end up abandoned in storage? I don't know. Death, maybe? Family disputes? Sometimes people just can't deal with belongings after someone passes." The thought sits uncomfortably. Margaret had kept every item of Robert's clothing for 6 months after his death, unable to part with shirts that still held his scent. Only necessity, selling his better suits to pay for Daniel's school expenses, had finally forced her to begin letting go. Amanda calls back around 8 p.m., armed with information. "Coach has specific patterns to their C logos," she explains, "and authentic bags have particular types of hardware and lining. Based on what you've described, they sound legitimate. What about selling them? What could we get?" Used Coach bags in good condition sell for 30–60% of retail, depending on the style and demand. So maybe $150 to $250 each? There are consignment shops that specialize in designer items, or you could list them yourself on eBay or Poshmark. "The Brighton jewelry is trickier," Amanda continues. "It's not fine jewelry, but it has a strong following. Collectors will pay close to retail for discontinued pieces. Pandora charms are easier. They have markings and can sell for $30.70 used, depending on the design and whether they're retired." "Amanda, you're amazing. How do you know all this?" "Mom, I work with college girls who talk about nothing but clothes and accessories. Plus, Google exists." "Right," Margaret says. "Mom?" Amanda's voice turns serious. "What's going on? Where did this storage unit come from?" "I lost the job opportunity today. I was desperate, Amanda. Your tuition's due next week. We're 2 months behind on the mortgage." Her voice catches. "I saw the auction sign and just took a chance." "With our last money?" "Yes. And I know it was reckless. But honey, I think it might pay off. There's so much more in that unit I haven't even gone through yet." "What do you need me to do?" "Research for now. Can you look up how to sell these items most efficiently? And maybe the value of higher-end women's clothing? Many pieces still have tags." "Consider it done. I'll start tonight after my shift." Amanda pauses. "Mom? Dad would be proud of you, taking a risk like that." "Thank you, sweetheart. That means everything." After hanging up, Margaret returns to her examination of Eleanor Blackwood's possessions. Beyond their monetary value, she finds herself curious about the woman herself. Who was Eleanor? Why did she have so many beautiful things carefully packed away? Among the clothing, Margaret discovers a small envelope containing photographs. Most show a well-dressed older woman at various social functions, charity galas, political fundraisers, community events. Eleanor Blackwood appears to be in her 60s or 70s in the most recent photos, with elegantly styled silver hair, tasteful makeup, and always impeccably dressed. She has the confident posture of someone comfortable in social settings. In many photos, Eleanor stands beside important-looking people in formal attire. One photo particularly catches Margaret's attention. Eleanor with an older man in a military dress uniform adorned with medals, his arm protectively around her waist. They stand on what appears to be the White House lawn. Margaret turns the photo over. Written in elegant script, "Richard and me, Veterans Recognition Ceremony, 2015. Richard, a husband perhaps." As she organizes the photos, Margaret notices a pattern. The earlier ones show Eleanor and Richard together at various functions. The later ones show only Eleanor, suggesting Richard may have passed away. Another photo shows Eleanor receiving an award, the plaque partially visible. "Outstanding Volunteer Service, Reagan Foundation." Margaret's exhaustion gives way to renewed fascination. Eleanor Blackwood wasn't just a woman with expensive taste. She appears to have been politically connected, socially active, and married to a military man. As she carefully repacks everything, Margaret finds herself speaking aloud to the empty room. "Who were you, Eleanor? And how did your life end up in trash bags?" The next day, Margaret returns to the storage unit at dawn, armed with proper storage containers, inventory sheets, and a renewed sense of purpose. Daniel comes along, his curiosity now fully engaged. Together, they establish a system. Margaret opens bags, Daniel catalogs items and repacks them in clear plastic bins. By midday, they've processed 12 bags, revealing an even more impressive collection than initially apparent. "Mom, look at this," Daniel calls, holding up a business card holder filled with elegantly embossed cards. "Eleanor Blackwood, Beacon Consulting Services." Margaret takes the cards, turning them over in her hands. "She was a businesswoman, a successful one, I'd guess," Daniel adds. As they work deeper into the unit, business documents emerge, neatly filed tax records, receipts, client contracts, all suggesting Beacon Consulting was a thriving enterprise specializing in event planning for political and charitable organizations. Around 2 p.m., they discover something extraordinary: a bag containing not clothing or accessories, but carefully wrapped holiday decorations, hand-blown glass ornaments from specialty boutiques, Waterford crystal snowflakes in original boxes, a collection of Lennox Christmas figurines wrapped in acid-free tissue paper. "These are expensive," Daniel remarks. "My friend's mom collects these. Some are worth hundreds each." Margaret sits back on her heels, surveying their progress. They've barely made it through a quarter of the unit's contents, yet the value of their discoveries already far exceeds her initial investment. More importantly, Eleanor Blackwood is emerging not just as a name, but as a person, successful, cultured, socially connected, meticulous, someone who valued beauty and quality, who moved in political circles, who apparently thrived after what appeared to be her husband's death. So why did her possessions end up here? And why packed in garbage bags, of all things? As if answering her unspoken question, the next bag yields a stack of correspondence bound with a simple rubber band, personal letters, most in envelopes addressed to "My dearest Eleanor" and signed "Forever yours, Richard." Margaret hesitates, feeling like an intruder. Reading someone's private love letters seems invasive, disrespectful. "Maybe we should just set these aside," she tells Daniel. He nods, understanding. "They might be important to family members if we can find them." The letters go into a special box labeled "Personal, Richard and Eleanor," alongside the photographs they've found. Margaret isn't ready to read the letters, but she can't bear to discard them either. Whatever happened to Eleanor Blackwood, her relationship with Richard deserves respect. By late afternoon, Margaret and Daniel have transformed chaos into order. 24 clear bins line the storage unit's walls, each labeled with contents: designer clothing, size 10, Brighton jewelry, holiday collectibles, business records, and so on. "We should head home," Margaret says. "We've made good progress." "What about all this?" He gestures to the remaining bags, still at least 3/4 of the unit's contents. "I'll come back tomorrow," Margaret promises. "The deadline to clear out is tomorrow night, but Frank said he could give me an extra day if needed. I might rent this unit for a month while we sort through everything properly." As they prepare to leave, Daniel pulls one final bag forward. "Let's just check this one," he suggests. It feels different. The bag is heavier, denser than the others. When Margaret slices it open, she discovers why. Jewelry boxes. Not fashion jewelry like Brighton, but proper jewelry cases, the kind that might hold genuine precious metals and stones. With trembling fingers, Margaret opens the first box, a gray velvet rectangle with Jeweler's Exchange embossed in silver. Inside, nestled against black satin, lies a strand of pearls with a 14 kelvins white gold clasp. "Are those real?" Daniel whispers. "I think so. They're heavy, and see how the light plays differently on each one? That's typical of real pearls." The next box contains a sapphire pendant on a silver chain. Another holds a set of garnet earrings. A fourth reveals a gold bracelet with what appears to be genuine jade insets. "Mom," Daniel's voice is hushed with awe. "I think we just found the jackpot." Margaret nods wordlessly, carefully returning each piece to its case. This isn't costume jewelry or even mid-range accessories like Brighton. These are genuine gemstones and precious metals, not necessarily museum-quality pieces, but certainly worth thousands rather than hundreds. As they secure the unit for the night, Daniel says quietly, "Do you ever wonder if Dad somehow knew? If he's watching out for us somehow?" "I don't know," she answers honestly. "But it does feel like something guided me here. Eleanor's stuff was waiting for you to find it. That's what I think. On the drive home, Margaret allows herself to begin calculating. Conservatively, the items they've cataloged so far could bring $15,000, $20,000 if sold properly. The remaining bags might contain much more. For the first time since Robert's diagnosis, Margaret feels something unfamiliar blooming in her chest. Hope. That night, after Daniel goes to bed, Margaret spreads Eleanor's photos across the kitchen table once more. She studies the woman's face, dignified, confident, joyful in many images. The perfect strand of pearls that appears in nearly every formal photo might be the very one Margaret held today. "Thank you," she whispers to the smiling face in the photographs. "I don't know how your treasures ended up in that storage unit, but they might just save my family." Day 3 at the storage unit begins with unexpected company. Amanda has driven 2 hours from campus, arriving on Margaret's doorstep at 6 a.m. with coffee and determination. "I have a 3-day weekend," she explains, "and this sounds more important than my political science paper." Margaret hadn't realized how desperately she needed her daughter's presence until that moment. With Amanda's help, they returned to Unit 47 equipped with additional supplies, jeweler's loupes, a small digital scale, Margaret's laptop, and reference guides Amanda printed from the university library. "I did some research on Eleanor Blackwood," Amanda explains. "There's not much online, but I found mentions of her in several political fundraising committees from 2008 to 2018. She appears in donor lists for the Reagan Foundation, Bush Library, and several veterans organizations." "That matches what we've found," Margaret replies. Photos of her at political events, letters suggesting her husband was military. Daniel had opted to stay home, claiming homework but likely giving mother and daughter space for reunion. The storage facility is quieter today, a few people loading or unloading personal units, but none of yesterday's auction energy. Frank waves from the office as they pass. "Making progress?" "Getting there," Margaret answers. "We might need to rent this unit for a month while we process everything. Come see me before you leave. We can arrange it." Unit 47 looks dramatically different after yesterday's organization. Clear bins line the walls, but dozens of black bags still await examination. "Wow," Amanda breathes, surveying the scene. "This is a lot." "We've barely scratched the surface," Margaret agrees. She shows Amanda their most valuable discoveries, the designer clothing, coach purses, fine jewelry. Amanda examines each with the confident assessment of her generation, checking authenticity markers and consulting online pricing guides. "These are legit," she confirms, inspecting a coach bag's interior. They settle into a comfortable rhythm, Amanda documenting each item on Margaret's laptop while Margaret opens bags and sorts contents. By mid-morning, they've processed another 8 bags, yielding more designer clothing, home decor items, and a collection of luxury bath products still in original packaging. "Listen to this," Amanda says, reading from Eleanor's business correspondence. "Thank you for coordinating the senator's fundraising dinner. Your attention to detail and connections made the evening a tremendous success. We raised over $2 million for the campaign. She must have been well-connected," Margaret muses, carefully removing a set of monogrammed linen napkins from their plastic wrapper, the embroidered initials EWB. "Eleanor W. Blackwood," Amanda notes, adding it to their growing dossier. Around noon, they reach a bag that changes everything. Unlike the others, this one contains no clothing or household items, but rather carefully wrapped objects nestled in bubble wrap and tissue paper. Amanda unwraps the first, a commemorative plate from President Reagan's inauguration, still in its presentation box. "Collectors would go crazy for this," Amanda remarks, showing Margaret the certificate of authenticity. The next item, a program from a White House Christmas reception, personalized with Eleanor and Richard Blackwood printed in gold leaf on the cover. Item after item emerges, each connected to American political history, inauguration commemoratives, signed photographs of Eleanor with various dignitaries, White House Christmas ornaments from multiple administrations. "Mom," Amanda says slowly, "I don't think Eleanor was just a donor or volunteer. She appears to have been seriously connected to multiple presidential administrations." The most remarkable item comes wrapped in blue velvet, a small wooden box containing what appears to be a medal or brooch. Margaret opens it carefully to reveal a pearl and diamond brooch nestled against navy satin, Accompanying documentation makes her gasp. Certificate of authenticity, she reads aloud. Pearl and diamond brooch, formerly belonging to First Lady Patricia Nixon, acquired from White House estate sale, $1,985. Amanda leans forward, eyes wide. Is that saying what I think it's saying? Margaret's hands tremble as she continues reading. This authentic brooch was purchased at the authorized estate sale of White House items personally owned by Patricia Nixon. The piece features genuine pearls and diamonds set in 14 Kelvins white gold and was worn by the First Lady at multiple state functions between 1970 to 1974. Additional documentation includes auction records showing Eleanor Blackwood purchased the brooch for $15,000 in 1985, along with a photograph of Patricia Nixon wearing it at a diplomatic reception. Amanda, Margaret breathes. This could be worth a small fortune now. More than that, Amanda responds. This is a piece of American presidential history. It belongs in a museum or serious collection. They sit in stunned silence, the magnitude of their discovery sinking in. This isn't just a valuable jewelry piece. It's a historical artifact with provable provenance, connecting it directly to a First Lady. Their next discovery proves equally astonishing. Another small box contains a gold compact with an inscription, "To Eleanor, with gratitude for your service to our nation, Nancy Reagan, 1987. A personal gift from Nancy Reagan, Amanda whispers. That's incredibly rare. First ladies don't generally give personalized gifts to supporters unless they've done something extraordinary. Margaret studies the compact. Unlike the Nixon brooch, this isn't just a purchased item. It's a direct gift, inscribed specifically to Eleanor. Its historical and collector value might be even greater. We need to be careful with these, Margaret decides, setting them aside in a special container. Amanda nods soberly. We should consult an expert in presidential memorabilia before deciding what to do with them. Around 3 p.m., they discover a leather portfolio containing military documents, medals, and commendations belonging to Colonel Richard Edward Blackwood, United States Army. His service records show a distinguished career spanning Korea and Vietnam, with decorations including a Purple Heart, Bronze Star, and numerous commendations for valor and leadership. So her husband was a war hero, Margaret murmurs, carefully examining a shadow box containing Colonel Blackwood's medals. That explains the White House connections. Military officers at his level often interact with political figures. Among Richard's papers, they find something unexpected: funeral programs. Colonel Richard Blackwood died 5 years earlier, with a full military burial at Arlington National Cemetery. The program lists Eleanor as his wife of 47 years, along with 2 children, James and Catherine Blackwood. Children, Margaret says softly. Eleanor had children. Then why didn't they claim her things? Amanda asks the obvious question. I don't know. Family estrangement? Legal disputes? It happens more often than you'd think, especially with valuable estates. The most poignant discovery comes wrapped in Richard's handkerchief, a small black and white photo of a young couple on their wedding day. Handsome Richard in his dress uniform, beautiful Eleanor in a modest lace gown, both radiating happiness. Written on the back in masculine handwriting, "The day I won the only battle that ever truly mattered." 1965. Margaret feels tears welling. The love between Eleanor and Richard seems to radiate from their possessions, his carefully preserved letters, her meticulously maintained mementos of their life together. Whatever separated these belongings from their family, it wasn't a lack of love. We should try to find the children, Margaret decides. Some of these things, especially his military honors, should be with family if possible. Amanda agrees, but adds practically, that doesn't mean we can't sell the commercial items. The clothing, jewelry, collectibles, those can help us while we figure out what to do with the historical pieces. By late afternoon, they'd processed nearly half the unit's contents. The historical and political items, now stored in separate containers, would require professional appraisal, but the commercial goods alone represent significant value. I need to head back to campus tonight, Amanda says reluctantly as they secure the unit. I have an early class tomorrow, but I can come back next weekend. You've already helped enormously, and knowing this might cover your tuition, that's everything to me. About that, Amanda starts. I was thinking maybe I could take next semester off, help you process all this. We could build an online business together. Absolutely not. Your education comes first, that's non-negotiable. But, she adds with a smile, I'll gladly accept weekend help and expert consultation. They stop by the office to arrange month-to-month rental of the unit. Frank seems unsurprised. Finding good stuff, huh? He asks knowingly. Margaret maintains a neutral expression, enough to make it worth keeping while we sort through everything. That's usually how it goes. The units that look least promising sometimes turn out best. He hesitates, then adds, Don't suppose you found any contact information for the previous owner? Sometimes people want their personal items back, even if they couldn't afford to keep the unit. Margaret considers this. Should she mention Eleanor Blackwood? But something holds her back, an instinct for discretion until she understands more about the situation. Nothing specific yet, she answers carefully. Just a name. If we find contact details, we'll let you know. That evening, after Amanda returns to campus, Margaret sits at her dining room table surrounded by research. She's created folders on her laptop, Eleanor's business, political connections, valuable items, organizing information as methodically as Eleanor herself might have done. Daniel joins her. So Amanda thinks this stuff is really valuable? Beyond what we initially thought, Margaret confirms. Some items have historical significance. They'll need professional appraisal. Can we sell anything yet? Daniel asks. The mortgage payment. Soon, Margaret promises. The Coach bags and some jewelry could be listed right away. I'm researching the best platforms. You seem different, Mom. Different how? I don't know. More. Alive. Like you were before Dad got sick. I feel useful again, she admits. Like I'm doing something that matters, not just treading water. Dad would like to see you like this. After he goes to bed, Margaret continues her research late into the night. She creates listings for 5 Coach handbags on an online consignment platform, carefully photographing each from multiple angles and documenting authenticity markers. She researches political memorabilia appraisers, fine jewelry authentication services, and specialized auction houses for historically significant items. Around midnight, she turns to a different search. Eleanor and Richard Blackwood's children. LinkedIn reveals James Blackwood as CEO of Blackwood Security Consulting in Virginia. No obvious results appear for Catherine Blackwood, though several possibilities emerge with married names. Margaret doesn't contact them yet. She needs more information first, a clearer understanding of why these precious family items ended up abandoned. But knowing they exist, that they can be found if necessary, provides reassurance. She falls asleep at the table, computer still open, surrounded by photos of Eleanor's life. For the first time since Robert's death, Margaret dreams not of loss, but of possibility. The next morning brings unexpected progress. 2 of the Coach bags have already sold, one for $225, another for $175. The funds won't be released until the buyers receive the items, but it's confirmation that their appraisals were accurate. Margaret spends the day alternating between creating more listings and returning to the storage unit. Working alone allows her to focus on a specific category: Eleanor's business records, receipts, client contracts, and tax documents reveal Beacon Consulting as a surprisingly profitable enterprise. What began as a small event planning business expanded into political fundraising consultation, eventually grossing over $300,000 annually at its peak. Bank statements show account balances once reaching 6 figures. Eleanor Blackwood wasn't just wealthy through marriage, she was financially successful in her own right, a female entrepreneur who built substantial wealth during an era when that was less common. Most interesting are the client lists. Eleanor's company organized events for senators, governors, military foundations, and charitable organizations. Her Rolodex, an actual physical Rolodex, charmingly vintage, includes direct contact information for people whose names Margaret recognizes from news headlines. These discoveries deepen the purpose. Mystery. A successful businesswoman with political connections and substantial assets shouldn't have her possessions end up in an abandoned storage unit. Something significant and likely tragic must have occurred. Late that afternoon, Margaret makes her most startling discovery yet. Hidden among business files, she finds medical records. Eleanor Wilson Blackwood, diagnosed with early-onset dementia, 2018. Treatment notes and care facility documentation tell a heartbreaking story. Eleanor's condition deteriorated rapidly following Richard's death. By 2019, she required full-time memory care. The most recent documents, dated 18 months ago, show her transfer to a specialized nursing facility, Guardian Memories Care Center. Margaret sits back, stunned. Dementia explains much about the abandoned storage unit. As Eleanor's condition worsened, perhaps her children struggled to manage her affairs. Business closed, house sold, possessions hastily packed, the typical aftermath when someone can no longer manage independently. But why wouldn't her children retrieve such valuable and sentimental items? The military medals alone should have been important to Richard and Eleanor's children. Further searching yields possible answers. Legal correspondence suggesting disputes between James and Catherine over their mother's care and estate. A letter from Eleanor's attorney mentions ongoing disagreements, making it difficult to resolve outstanding matters, including the storage unit. Contents. Family discord. How many estates has Margaret seen fractured by it? When her own father died, her brothers didn't speak for a year over a disputed woodworking shop. Eleanor's story grows clearer. A successful woman who built a business and political network, who lost her beloved husband and then her own mind, whose children became entangled in disputes while their mother's treasures sat forgotten in a storage unit. That evening, Margaret calls Amanda with updates. "We should contact the nursing home," Amanda suggests, after hearing about the medical records. "If Eleanor is still alive, we need to handle this differently." "I'll call tomorrow," Margaret agrees. Though given the timeline and the fact that Frank said payments stopped 6 months ago, neither completes the thought. If Eleanor died in care, with family disputes unresolved, the abandoned unit makes tragic sense. The Coach bags sold. Margaret changes the subject. $400 already, with more listings active. That's fantastic, and just the beginning. Before ending the call, Amanda mentions something unexpected. "I told my political science professor about the Nixon brooch and Reagan compact." Without naming names or giving specifics, she adds quickly, "He said items with that kind of provenance and documentation can be worth tens of thousands to the right collectors." He recommended an appraiser who specializes in presidential memorabilia. The conversation leaves Margaret both hopeful and pensive. The financial prospects are increasingly promising, but Eleanor's story has become personal to her. She recognizes in Eleanor another woman who built a life through determination, who loved deeply, who faced challenges with dignity. "I'll make sure your treasures find proper homes," she whispers to Eleanor's photograph, "and I'll find your children if I can, I promise." Over the following days, Margaret establishes a routine. Mornings for creating listings and packing sold items for shipment. Afternoons at the storage unit, methodically processing remaining bags. Evenings for research and inventory management. By day 7, she sold nearly $2,000 worth of items, mainly handbags and jewelry, with clothing moving more slowly but steadily. The dining room has transformed into a processing center, with labeled boxes, shipping supplies, and inventory sheets covering every surface. Daniel helps after school, his initial skepticism transformed into entrepreneurial interest. He's particularly useful with technology, creating spreadsheets that track each item from discovery to sale, calculating profit margins, and suggesting optimal pricing. The presidential items remain carefully stored, awaiting professional appraisal. Margaret has arranged a consultation with the expert Amanda recommended, but the appointment is still 2 weeks away. Meanwhile, the everyday items, clothing, household goods, collectible, continue generating steady income. Margaret calls Guardian Memories Care Center, introducing herself carefully as someone helping organize Eleanor Blackwood's affairs. The response confirms her suspicion. Eleanor passed away 8 months earlier. The administrator remembers her as a lovely woman who often spoke of her White House connections, but whose family visited infrequently. The confirmation of Eleanor's death resolves any ethical qualms about selling her possessions. Legally, the storage auction transferred ownership to Margaret. Morally, she's now certain she's not disposing of a living person's treasured belongings. On day 10, Margaret reaches the back of the storage unit and makes her most significant discovery yet. A heavy black trash bag, different from the others, contains what appears to be Eleanor's most personal archives: photo albums, scrapbooks, and a leather-bound journal. The journal reveals Eleanor's private thoughts during her final cogent years. Entries from after Richard's death express grief, loneliness, and increasing awareness of her cognitive decline. Richard has been gone 2 years today. The children visited, but the tension between them makes these occasions more stressful than comforting. James believes Catherine is only interested in her inheritance. Catherine thinks James mismanaged my affairs during my hospital stay. Neither sees what their father would. That love matters more than things. I've decided to document my most valuable possessions and their stories. Perhaps someday, when I'm gone, someone will appreciate not just their worth, but their meaning. The next pages contain detailed descriptions of significant items: the Nixon brooch, the Reagan compact, jewelry from Richard, family heirlooms, with stories of their acquisition and meaning. Eleanor's handwriting deteriorates as the journal progresses, visual evidence of her condition worsening. The final entry, barely legible. I can feel my mind slipping away like water through open fingers. Soon these memories will be gone, but the treasures remain. I hope whoever finds them will see beyond their market value to the love and history they represent. Margaret closes the journal, tears streaming down her face. In Eleanor's last coherent thoughts, she anticipated exactly what had happened: a stranger finding her possessions, learning her story. 6 weeks after purchasing Storage Unit 47, Margaret's life has transformed. The dining room operation has expanded to include the living room and spare bedroom. Clear organizational systems replace initial chaos. Spreadsheets track inventory, sales, authentication processes, and shipping. Most significantly, Margaret has developed genuine expertise. Through research and practical experience, she's learned to authenticate designer items, accurately price vintage clothing, and connect with specialized buyers for Eleanor's eclectic collection. The financial impact is undeniable. To date, she's sold nearly $18,000 worth of items, primarily through online platforms, but also through consignment shops for higher-end pieces. This doesn't include the presidential memorabilia still awaiting professional appraisal, or the fine jewelry being authenticated by a certified gemologist. Tonight, Margaret sits at her kitchen table with a calculator and growing stacks of documentation. The mortgage company's latest threatening letter lies beside her, its dire warnings now toothless. Tomorrow, she'll pay 3 months of missed payments, plus penalties, approximately $5,300 that would have been impossible 6 weeks ago. The phone rings. It's the mortgage company's automated system, reminding her of impending foreclosure proceedings. "Mrs. Holloway, we need to discuss your account," the live representative says when Margaret navigates the menu to reach a human. For the first time in 2 years, Margaret's voice is steady, confident. "I'll have your full payment by tomorrow, plus penalty fees." "Ma'am, are you sure? The amount is quite substantial." "I'm sure." After hanging up, she calls Amanda. Her daughter answers quickly, tension in her voice. "Mom, is everything okay?" "Everything's more than okay, honey," Margaret says. "Not only is your tuition covered, but I'm sending money for books and a new laptop." "Mom, how did you—" "What happened? Did you sell something big from the storage unit? I learned that sometimes other people's endings become our new beginnings." The conversation with Daniel comes next, as he returns from basketball practice. Margaret meets him at the door with car keys. "Get cleaned up. We're going shopping." Daniel blinks. "Shopping? For what?" "Everything you need, sweetheart. Clothes, shoes, school supplies, and maybe something extra just because." "Mom, are you serious? I know we sold some stuff, but—" Margaret shows him her bank statement. Daniel's eyes widened. "Mom, that's a lot of money. And more is coming. We've barely sold half the items, and not even the most valuable ones yet. I was so scared we were going to lose the house." Margaret pulls him close, his tall frame folding into her embrace, like when he was small. "We're not losing anything else, baby. Mom figured it out." The shopping trip feels surreal after years of rigid budgeting. Daniel initially selects only necessities, basic shoes, practical clothes. Margaret gently encourages him to choose items he actually wants: proper basketball shoes, trendy jeans, a jacket like his friends have. By the end, they're both giddy with the simple pleasure of not checking price tags. Over dinner, at a restaurant, another luxury long abandoned, Daniel asks the question that's clearly been on his mind. Is this permanent? Or just until the money runs out? I believe this is sustainable, she answers honestly. I'm building a real business here, not just selling random items. I'm developing expertise, connections, and a reputation. The presidential memorabilia alone could be worth more than everything we've sold so far. You seem different, happier. I am. The realization strikes Margaret fully as she says it. I'm using skills I'd forgotten I had. Your father always said I had an eye for quality and value. Turns out he was right. He usually was, Daniel says. The next day brings another milestone. Margaret drives to Robert's grave, which she hasn't visited in months, partly from lack of time, but mostly from shame over their financial struggles. Standing beside his headstone with fresh flowers and her bank statements, she speaks aloud. I kept my promise, Bobby. Our babies are safe. The simple marker bears only his name, dates, and beloved husband and father. They couldn't afford more elaborate memorialization when he died. Margaret traces the letters, remembering how he'd squeeze her hand in his final weeks, whispering, "You're stronger than you know. Maggie, you were right," she tells him, "about everything, about taking risks, about my abilities." She laughs softly. You'd love this story, Bobby. A storage unit full of trash bags that turned out to contain treasure. Very your kind of plot twist. She imagines his response, his deep chuckle, the way his eyes would crinkle at the corners. For the first time, the memory brings joy rather than pain. I'm going to upgrade your marker, she decides. Something with that quote you loved about courage. And I'm thinking about moving too. Not right away, but maybe next year. Too many sad memories in that house. The one-sided conversation continues, Margaret sharing details about Eleanor's possessions, her growing business, the children's reactions. It feels healing, connecting her new path to the love that sustained her for decades. I'm not just surviving anymore, she concludes. I'm building something, and it all started because I heard your voice telling me to take a chance. Back home, she finds an email from Amanda. Her tuition payment has been processed successfully, and she's registered for next semester's classes. The following week brings the long-awaited appointment with Harrison Wells, the presidential memorabilia expert. He arrives at Margaret's home precisely on time, a meticulous man in his 70s with wire-rimmed glasses and an air of scholarly authority. Margaret has prepared carefully, arranging the most significant historical items on the dining room table with their documentation. She watches nervously as Wells examines each piece, his expression carefully neutral. May I ask how you acquired these items? He inquired, studying the Nixon brooch through a jeweler's loupe. Margaret explains the storage auction and subsequent discoveries, including Eleanor's political connections. Eleanor Blackwood. The name is familiar in certain circles. She and her husband were significant donors to several presidential libraries and foundations. His assessment exceeds Margaret's expectations. The Nixon brooch, with its impeccable documentation and historical significance, he values between $35,000, $45,000 to the right collector. The Reagan Compact, as a personal gift with inscription, approximately $25,000, $30,000. These aren't just valuable items, Wells explains, handling each with reverent care. They're tangible connections to American presidential history. The provenance is exceptional. Photos of Nixon actually wearing this brooch, Reagan personally inscribing this compact. Museums would display these proudly. Other political items, signed photographs, commemorative pieces, White House Christmas ornaments, he values collectively at another $20,000, $25,000. You have options, Wells concludes. Private collectors would pay premium prices, particularly for the Nixon and Reagan pieces. Presidential libraries or museums might offer less financially but would ensure the items remain accessible to the public. Specialized auctions could potentially yield the highest returns but involve more uncertainty. He leaves Margaret with contact information for reputable auction houses, private collectors, and museum acquisition departments. Whatever you decide, these items deserve proper handling. They're pieces of American history. After he departs, Margaret sits stunned by the valuation. The historical items alone could bring $80,000, $100,000, far more than she ever imagined. Combined with the remaining jewelry, clothing, and collectibles, Eleanor's possessions might ultimately yield over $150,000. The arithmetic of salvation began writing itself across her future. Mortgage paid in full. Children's education is secured. Medical bills eliminated. Perhaps even a modest retirement fund started. That evening, she calls Amanda with the news. "That's incredible, Mom. What will you do with them?" "I'm leaning toward the auction route for most pieces. But Richard's military medals and some personal items, those should go to the family if we can find them. Have you looked more for the children? James and Catherine? Some basic searches. James is fairly easy to locate. His security consulting firm has a website. Catherine is harder to track, possibly because of a name change through marriage. Should we contact them? Not yet. I want to understand more about why they abandoned these things. Eleanor's journal mentioned family disputes. I need to proceed carefully." The conversation shifts to business logistics. Amanda, embracing her role as researcher-in-chief, has investigated legal requirements for Margaret's growing enterprise. "You should register as an official business," she advises, "for tax purposes and legitimacy. Maybe Second Chance Treasures or something similar." "Second Chance Treasures," Margaret repeats. "I like that. It honors both Eleanor and what her possessions have given us." By week 8, Margaret has established formal business structures. A spare bedroom has become a photography studio for listing items. The dining room functions as inventory management central. The living room serves as packaging and shipping headquarters. Daniel, increasingly involved, has created a logo and business cards. His technical skills prove invaluable for online listings and inventory tracking. After school and weekends, he works alongside Margaret, earning a modest commission on sales he facilitates. "You've got a good eye," Margaret tells him one evening as they photograph vintage brooches. Daniel shrugs. "I like the stories behind things, like how this pin probably belonged to a real person who wore it to special occasions." "That's exactly what makes this work meaningful," Margaret agrees. "We're not just selling objects. We're finding new homes for pieces of someone's life." This perspective guides her business development. Each listing includes context about the item, not identifying Eleanor specifically, but noting from the estate of a Washington, D.C. society woman or previously owned by a political fundraiser with White House connections. These details add perceived value and attract buyers, seeking not just products but stories. A vintage evening bag sells for $50 more when described as carried to political galas in the nation's capital during the N. 1990 seconds. Margaret's confidence grows with each successful transaction. Skills dormant since leaving her marketing career re-emerge: photography, copywriting, negotiation, customer service. She develops relationships with consignment shops, jewelry buyers, and vintage clothing dealers. Most significantly, her professional identity rebuilds itself. No longer just Robert's widow or Amanda and Daniel's mother, she became Margaret Holloway, proprietor of Second Chance Treasures, specialist in estate evaluation and political memorabilia. This transformation doesn't escape Daniel's notice. "You walk differently now," he observes one morning as Margaret prepares for a meeting with a jewelry appraiser. "Different how?" "Taller, like before Dad got sick, like you know what you're doing again." The observation brings unexpected tears. Margaret hadn't realized how visibly her confidence had crumbled or how noticeably it had returned. Her financial situation stabilizes rapidly. By week 10, she has paid off the mortgage arrears and 2 months in advance, cleared Daniel's school expenses for the year, covered Amanda's tuition, and purchased her a new laptop, paid down significant portions of Robert's medical debt, established a business checking account with operating capital, created an emergency fund for the first time in years. Still, the most valuable items remain unsold, awaiting strategic decisions. The presidential memorabilia sits in a safe deposit box, while Margaret considers auction options. The fine jewelry awaits final authentication and optimal selling conditions. Unexpected challenges emerge alongside success. Sales taxation requires complicated calculations. Shipping insurance becomes essential as item values increase. Authentication services cost hundreds or sometimes thousands of dollars upfront, requiring careful cash flow management. Margaret navigates these complexities with growing assurance. She joins online communities of estate liquidators and vintage sellers, absorbing their collective wisdom. Amanda connects her with a business professor who offers pro bono advice on structure and taxation. By the 3-month mark, Second Chance Treasures has transitioned from a desperate survival tactic to legitimate enterprise. Margaret now rents a small storefront in a local antique mall, displaying select items while maintaining online operations from home. The storage unit stands nearly empty, its contents either sold, displayed for sale, or carefully preserved pending authentication. Eleanor's personal papers, photographs, and Richard's military honors remain separated from commercial inventory, awaiting decisions about their fate. One rainy afternoon, Margaret returns to the storage facility to formally terminate her rental agreement. The unit that changed her life now contains only empty bins and packing materials. Frank meets her at the office to process paperwork. "Found some good stuff after all, huh?" he asks. "Life-changing, actually. I've started a business based on what I found." "Good for you," Frank says. "Most units just yield temporary relief. Sounds like yours brought something more permanent." As Margaret turns to leave, Frank calls after her. "By the way, I got a call about that unit a few days ago. A guy named Blackwood asked if anyone had claimed the contents. What did you tell him?" "Just that the unit was auctioned months ago, as per our legal obligation." "Didn't give your name or anything." Frank studies her reaction. "Should I have?" "No, that's fine," Margaret assures him. "Did he leave contact information?" "Nope. Said he'd call back, but hasn't yet." The encounter unsettles Margaret deeply. James Blackwood, presumably Eleanor's son, has finally come looking for his mother's possessions, 3 months too late. That evening, Margaret reviews Eleanor's journal again, seeking insight into the family dynamics. The entries paint a complex picture. Eleanor deeply loved her children but was disappointed by their priorities and ongoing conflicts. "James believes money solves everything," she wrote after Richard's funeral. "Catherine thinks appearances matter most. Neither remembers what their father valued above all: honor and kindness." Another entry describes increasing isolation. "Neither child has time to visit. My calls go to voicemail. The grandchildren are strangers who appear at Christmas and birthdays. Is this what remains of our family?" The most painful passage comes near the end. "I've asked both children repeatedly to help sort through Richard's and my possessions. The storage unit fees accumulate monthly, but they're too busy with their own lives to spare a weekend. These treasures we collected over a lifetime, will they end up abandoned like their owner?" Eleanor's prediction proved heartbreakingly accurate. Her treasures did end up abandoned, but also found by someone who recognized their value beyond price tags. Margaret makes a decision. She will contact James Blackwood, but first, she'll prepare thoroughly. If the storage unit call suggests renewed interest in Eleanor's possessions, she needs to understand his motivations and protect herself legally. Amanda helps research James Blackwood more extensively. His security consulting firm specializes in government contracts, with offices in Virginia and Florida. Media coverage suggests a wealthy, politically connected businessman in his late 50s. His company biography mentions proud military heritage but conspicuously omits personal details. Catherine proves harder to track until Amanda discovers a society page mention of Catherine Blackwood Reynolds at a charity gala in Palm Beach. Further searching reveals she married investment banker William Reynolds 15 years ago and now chairs several charitable foundations. Both siblings live lives of apparent wealth and social position, making their abandonment of valuable family possessions even more perplexing. Margaret consults an attorney who specializes in estate matters. He confirms that the storage auction transferred legal ownership to Margaret. She has no obligation to return anything. However, he suggests that if she chooses to return personal items of sentimental but limited financial value, such a gesture might prevent potential complications. Armed with legal clarity and thorough research, Margaret drafts a carefully worded email to James Blackwood's business address. "Dear Mr. Blackwood, I recently acquired the contents of a storage unit previously rented in the name of Eleanor Blackwood. Among the commercial items were personal effects, including family photographs and military honors belonging to Colonel Richard Blackwood. While the storage auction legally transferred ownership to me, I believe these particular items hold sentimental value that transcends their market worth. I would be willing to return specific personal mementos, particularly Colonel Blackwood's military honors, to his family. If you're interested in discussing this matter, please contact me at your convenience. Sincerely, Margaret Holloway, Second Chance Treasures. The response comes within hours, not an email, but a phone call from James Blackwood's executive assistant requesting an immediate meeting. Margaret agrees to meet James at a local restaurant the following day, suggesting a public setting for this initial contact. That night, she carefully selects items to bring: a few family photographs, one of Richard's lesser military medals as proof of provenance, and copies, not originals, of certain documents establishing Eleanor and Richard's identities. The truly valuable items remain secured elsewhere. Sleep eludes her as questions circle. Will James Blackwood be grateful or hostile? Does he know what treasures his mother possessed? Is he genuinely interested in family mementos or only valuable assets? Morning brings another surprise: sales notifications from 3 online platforms. While Margaret slept, items sold totaling $4,700. Second Chance Treasures has developed momentum independent of her daily efforts, a legitimate business rather than just a temporary salvation. This success bolsters her confidence as she prepares to meet James Blackwood. Whatever his reaction, she approaches him not as a desperate widow who got lucky, but as a businesswoman who recognized value where others saw only trash bags. James Blackwood cuts an imposing figure as he enters the restaurant, tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that suggests both wealth and power. Margaret recognizes Eleanor's eyes in his face and Richard's military bearing in his posture. He scans the room, locates Margaret, and approaches with purposeful strides. His handshake is firm but not aggressive, his smile professional rather than warm. "Mrs. Holloway, thank you for agreeing to meet on such short notice. Please, call me Margaret." James sits, immediately signaling for service, a man accustomed to attention. After ordering coffee, he addresses Margaret directly. "You have my mother's belongings." "Yes, I purchased the contents of her storage unit at auction 3 months ago." "I see." His expression reveals little. "And now you're selling these items through your business." "Some items, yes," she acknowledges. "The commercial goods, clothing, household items, collectibles. But I've kept personal effects separate, particularly family photographs and your father's military honors. Those are what I offered to return to you." "That's unexpectedly considerate. They're part of your family history. They belong with their family if possible." "If possible," he repeats. The server's arrival with coffee creates a momentary pause. Margaret uses the interruption to retrieve the folder she brought, removing several photographs. "I thought you might like to see what I found. This appears to be your parents' wedding day." "Yes. Dad always kept this in his wallet." Margaret passes another image: Richard in full dress uniform receiving a commendation, Eleanor beaming beside him. This seems to be from a military ceremony in the 1980 seconds. James nods. "Distinguished Service Medal presentation. I was in college then." For several minutes, Margaret shares selected photographs, watching as James's professional facade softens incrementally with each image. His responses become less guarded, more personal, occasionally including brief anecdotes about events pictured. "This was their anniversary cruise," he notes at one point. 30 years. Dad surprised her with it. Finally, Margaret removes the military medal she brought, a National Defense Service medal, one of several identical ones in Richard's collection. "This is just one example of your father's military honors. There are many more, including his Purple Heart and Bronze Star." James stares at the medal, then at Margaret, genuine emotion finally breaking through his controlled exterior. "Why did you contact me?" he asks directly. "You legally own everything in that unit. You could have sold it all without a word." "Because some things shouldn't be bought and sold," Margaret answers. "Your father served his country with distinction. His honors should be with his family." "Mrs. Holloway, Margaret, I owe you an explanation and perhaps an apology." He sighs deeply, rotating his coffee cup absently. "After my father died, my mother began showing signs of dementia. It progressed rapidly, complicated by grief. My sister Catherine and we disagreed about her care, fundamentally and persistently. The controlled exterior cracks further as painful memories surface. Catherine wanted Mother in assisted living near her in Florida. I thought she should remain in Virginia with in-home care. We argued while Mother declined. By the time we realized how serious her condition was, she required full-time memory care. That must have been devastating, Margaret offers. We had to liquidate most of her assets to fund her care. The house sold, furniture auctioned or donated, the storage unit. He hesitated. That was where we placed items we couldn't decide about immediately. Mother's personal belongings, Dad's military things, household goods neither of us had room for. And then we kept fighting, James admits. Over money, over Mother's care, over old grievances that suddenly seemed urgent. The storage unit became symbolic of our inability to cooperate. Neither would go without the other, neither would compromise on dividing contents. So it remained in limbo. Yes, we kept paying the fees automatically, telling ourselves we'd deal with it someday. Then Mother died, and the estate went into probate, with more complications between Catherine and me. James rubs his forehead wearily. Somehow, the storage payment arrangements lapsed during legal shuffling. By the time I realized, it was too late. The explanation rings true, not neglect born of indifference, but the tragic consequence of family dysfunction during crisis. Margaret has witnessed similar patterns among friends and relatives when death and dementia collide with unresolved tensions. I understand, she says quietly. You're being extraordinarily gracious about this. Most people would simply profit from our family dysfunction and move on. I lost my husband 2 years ago. Cancer. It left me with 2 children to support, a mountain of medical debt, and barely enough skills to stay afloat. She pauses, surprised by her willingness to share such personal details with this stranger. That storage unit saved my family from financial ruin. But in the process of cataloging your mother's possessions, I came to know her through her things, her photographs, even her journal. Her journal? James looks startled. She documented her thoughts as her condition worsened. It was evident how deeply she loved you and your sister, despite the difficulties. I'd like to see that journal, if possible. Of course, it's among the personal items I've kept separate. Their conversation shifts to practical matters. James explains that Catherine remains largely uninterested in their mother's possessions, focused instead on financial aspects of the estate. He asks detailed questions about what Margaret found, seeming genuinely surprised by mentions of valuable jewelry and political memorabilia. Mother never discussed the extent of her collections, he admits. As their coffee concludes, James makes an unexpected proposal. I'd like to purchase certain items back, specifically Dad's military honors and Mother's personal papers. The rest, he gestures expansively. You've built a business from them. That seems fitting somehow. I wasn't planning to sell the personal items, Margaret clarifies. I always intended to return those to the family if possible. You're an unusual person, Margaret Holloway. I can see why Mother's possessions found their way to you. They arranged to meet again at Margaret's home the following day. James will review the personal items Margaret has kept separate, while she'll prepare an inventory of particularly significant pieces he might wish to reclaim beyond family documents and military honors. As they part, James asks suddenly, "Did you find a sapphire necklace, by chance, in a black velvet case? It was Dad's last gift to Mother." "Not yet, though I haven't processed everything. I'll look specifically before you come tomorrow." That evening, Margaret searches through remaining jewelry items, particularly Eleanor's personal pieces rather than fashion accessories. She finds nothing matching James's description until she revisits a container labeled Military Honors, Colonel Blackwood. Hidden beneath Richard's Purple Heart box, wrapped in tissue paper, she discovers a small black velvet case she previously overlooked. Inside lies an exquisite diamond and sapphire necklace, a pendant featuring a large sapphire surrounded by diamonds, suspended on a platinum chain. A note in Richard's handwriting accompanies it. "For my Eleanor, who served our country as faithfully as any soldier. Wear this and remember that love transcends even death." Tucked beside it, official documentation, a jewelry appraisal valuing the piece at $85,000 6 months before Richard's death. Margaret sits on her living room floor, surrounded by the remnants of Eleanor and Richard's love story, crying for people she never met but now understands completely. This wasn't just a storage unit, it was a love letter from beyond the grave, a final gift from one military family to another. Eleanor had hidden her most precious possession where only someone truly attentive would find it, among her husband's military honors. Perhaps she feared her deteriorating mind would forget its location. Perhaps she wanted to ensure it remained connected to Richard's memory. The next day, James arrives at Margaret's home, visibly anxious. His corporate polish has diminished, replaced by the more vulnerable demeanor of a son confronting his mother's legacy. Margaret has prepared carefully, personal items displayed respectfully in her living room, the journal placed prominently, and military honors arranged in their proper order of precedence as military protocol dictates. James stands silently before the display, emotions playing across his face. He lifts photographs, examines medals, and gently touches items that clearly trigger memories. "You've treated these with remarkable respect," he says. "They deserve nothing less," Margaret responds. She hands him Eleanor's journal. "You should read this privately. It contains your mother's thoughts during her decline, but also her reflections on her life with your father, her hopes for you and Catherine. Was she angry with us? In her writings? Disappointed sometimes, confused often, but never without love," Margaret answers. She understood that grief affects people differently. He nods, clutching the journal like a lifeline to his mother's thoughts. "There's one more thing," Margaret says quietly, retrieving the velvet box. "You asked about this specifically. Dad's sapphire," he whispers, tears forming. "He bought it on their last anniversary. I helped him select it. It was hidden with his military honors," Margaret explains, showing him Richard's note. "And it's quite valuable." "It wasn't about the value for him," James responds. The sapphire matched her eyes. Dad always said mother's eyes were his guiding stars through war and peace alike. The moment crystallizes something for Margaret. Beyond financial value, beyond historical significance, these objects embody human connections. Every item in that storage unit represented relationships, memories, moments that mattered. James wipes his eyes, embarrassed by his display of emotion. "I apologize. This is more affecting than I anticipated." "No apology needed. These are powerful reminders." They sit together while James collects himself, then discuss practical matters. He wishes to reclaim all personal items, photographs, documents, military honors, jewelry with sentimental associations. For everything else, he makes an unexpected proposal. "My mother would have appreciated how you've handled her possessions," he states. "The care you've taken, the respect you've shown, the business you've built, it honors her legacy rather than simply liquidating it." From his briefcase, James removes a check. "This isn't for the items, those are yours by legal right. This is from Mother's estate, which Catherine and I finally settled properly. She would have wanted this money to go to someone who honored her memory." Margaret stares at the check, stunned by the amount. $50,000. "I can't accept this," she protests. "There's one condition," James continued. "Mother always supported military families and widows. She'd want you to remember that blessing comes with responsibility." The parallel between their situations strikes Margaret forcefully. She too is a widow rebuilding life after devastating loss. Eleanor would understand her journey intimately. "I'd like to offer a business proposition as well. My company regularly works with clients who need estate liquidation, downsizing assistance, or valuation of political and historical items. Your expertise would be valuable to them." The offer represents more than additional income. It's professional recognition of skills Margaret has developed through necessity and determination. A path forward that honors both Eleanor's legacy and Margaret's own capabilities. "I'll consider both offers," she says carefully. Before departing, James hands Margaret a final envelope. "These are photos of Mother and Dad at various White House events, wearing the jewelry you found. She'd want you to know the stories behind each piece." That evening, after James leaves with his parents' personal effects, Margaret reviews the photographs he provided. Eleanor wearing the Nixon brooch while shaking hands with President Bush. Richard in full dress uniform beside Eleanor, who wears the sapphire necklace at a Veterans Day reception. The Reagan Compact is visible in Eleanor's hand as she chats with a Supreme Court justice. The final photograph affects Margaret deeply. Eleanor and Richard standing together on their last anniversary, she wearing the sapphire necklace, he in a suit with his military lapel pin. Their faces reflect decades of partnership, challenges weathered together, love deepened by time. Written on the back in James's handwriting, "Their last anniversary." Dad said that night, "We've built a legacy that matters, Ellie. Not just things, but service and love." Margaret recognizes the truth in those words. Eleanor and Richard's legacy wasn't just possessions, it was the impact of their service, the relationships they built, the principles they embodied. Similarly, Robert's legacy wasn't financial security he couldn't provide, but the love and courage he instilled in his family. Margaret's tears now are not of grief, but gratitude for Robert's enduring influence that gave her courage to take that fateful risk, for Eleanor's treasures that provided not just financial salvation, but renewed purpose. The following week brings significant developments. Margaret accepts James's check, committing to use part of it to establish a small foundation supporting military widows and their children. She also agrees to consult for his clients, requiring estate valuation or liquidation services. The presidential memorabilia, the Nixon brooch and Reagan compact, she consigns to a prestigious auction house specializing in political Americana. With James's additional photographs establishing provenance, the auction house estimates even higher values than initially projected. Most importantly, Margaret officially incorporates Second Chance Treasures as a legitimate business entity. The mission statement reflects lessons learned through Eleanor's possessions, finding new stories for treasured objects, honoring their past while creating their future. Amanda comes home for a weekend to help reorganize the expanded business. The dining room operation has outgrown its space. They transform the garage into a proper inventory and shipping center. "I can't believe how much everything has changed," Amanda marvels as they arrange workstations. "3 months ago, we were facing foreclosure. Now you're a business owner with industry connections." Margaret smiles, recalling her desperate drive on that winter highway. "I was just trying to survive. I never imagined building something new." "Dad would be so proud," Amanda says, "not just of the business success, but how you honored Eleanor's story." That evening, Margaret places a call that's long overdue to her extended family, from whom she'd withdrawn during Robert's illness and after his death. Pride and shame had kept her isolated, unwilling to admit her financial struggles or accept help that felt like charity. Now she reconnects from a position of strength, inviting siblings and their families for a proper reunion. The resulting gathering fills her home with laughter and conversation, healing breaches created by grief and absence. Her brother Michael, examining her business cards and inventory systems, remarks with admiration, "You've created something remarkable here, Maggie. From absolutely nothing." "Not from nothing," she corrects him. "From someone else's ending. That's the beauty of it. Everything valuable has a history before it comes to us, and a future after it leaves us." As winter turns to spring, the presidential items go to auction. Margaret attends in person, watching as the Nixon brooch sells for $42,000 and the Reagan compact for $28,000, both exceeding estimates and generating interesting media coverage that further enhances her business reputation. With debts cleared and financial security established, Margaret faces a new question: what next? The initial urgency of survival has passed. Eleanor's possessions have mostly found new homes. The business operates smoothly with established systems and growing client referrals. The answer emerges gradually as Margaret helps other families navigate loss and transition. Second Chance Treasures evolves from simply selling valuable items to providing comprehensive estate services, helping families preserve what matters most while respectfully repurposing what doesn't. 1 year after purchasing Storage Unit 47, Margaret receives an unexpected package from James Blackwood. Inside, she finds a small replica of Richard's bronze star mounted in a shadow box with a simple inscription, "For courage when it mattered most." A note accompanies it. "Mother would have wanted you to have this. Your courage in taking a chance on that storage unit mirrors the spirit that earned Dad his medals. Both of you understood that sometimes saving others requires risking everything." Margaret displays the replica prominently in her office, a daily reminder of interconnected lives and second chances. Below it, she places a framed photo of Robert, ensuring both men whose courage influenced her journey remain present in her new beginning.